Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, it's good.
Welcome. So if you're joining us, we are doing a debrief on 2020 weddings. I'm Krista Gorman. I'm a photographer with Loverly Weddings and Lifestyle. And these are a few of my awesome couples from this year, or brides. And they're going to talk to me today about their weddings. We're going to just do a debrief on sort of how things went for them getting married during a pandemic. We thought this would be super helpful for couples in 2021 who are starting to plan their weddings and getting a little nervous because obviously COVID's still a thing. We're still in a pandemic. But I want you to get some real feedback from couples who got married right at the heart of it. And I think that'll help ease a lot of fears for couples out there who are starting to get into the planning stages of their weddings and starting to wonder if they should be postponing or not. So with that, I'm going to do a little round table. I'm going to introduce, we've got Dave and Alicia. We've got Andrea and her husband, Greg, but I don't think Greg's joining us today.
Sports are on, so that one, unfortunately.
Fair. And we've got Liz and Ben, and it's Liz's birthday. Happy birthday. Okay, who wants to go first? Dave and Alicia, you want to start for me?
Sure.
So if you could tell us, why don't we do this? Why don't you tell us when your wedding was, where it was, or if you don't want to discuss the venue, you can say just the city, how many people you had at your wedding. Did you have to make adjustments to your wedding? Did you change it in a drastic way? And do you regret having your wedding during a pandemic? So those are just sort of the highlights.
Okay.
I can ask these questions again as you go, but just kind of give you some focus.
Okay, perfect. So we got married October 10th. So right Thanksgiving weekend, as numbers were just starting to go back up. We got married at Pillar and Post in Niagara on the Lake. That was a fabulous location for us. In terms of having to change, we had 38 people. Originally, just to give everyone an idea of what we had anticipated originally when we first got engaged, we were looking at just over 100. And then obviously had to scale back a few times and ended up with about 38 people, including us, at the wedding. In terms of changing our dream of what we thought it was going to look like in the beginning, definitely. When we started planning out our wedding, we had food stations. We had, like I said, over 100 people. Things looked quite a bit different and the ebbs and the flows throughout the day. But having the pandemic come into play, we did have to adjust many things in terms of the numbers, in terms of the meal. Had to be a sit down. We had to rethink sort of the whole feel, what we thought was the whole feel of the event. What we were going through for originally was really more cash seating, a dance, but there was no formality to it. And we had to really switch that. And we ended up doing more of a wine tasting to bring some flavor to it and fun still to the sit down formal dinner. We ended up doing a wine tasting, which really ended up being super fun in the end, but definitely different from what we originally envisioned.
Yeah, and then one of the other things that was the most different for us that we hadn't really thought about much until right near the end was we ended up live streaming the event, and that was something that was great because it enabled people who couldn't come but really wanted to come and felt maybe badly that they couldn't come to still be there with us live, and also maybe some people that we wouldn't even have thought would be there in the old format if there hadn't been COVID now joined us online, so that was kind of neat too.
Yeah, so I guess in the end, we actually, if you include people in person and on online, we ended up with our original number really, because we had closer to 50 people online that joined us for the ceremony itself. So we ended up with our actual number, and then for the dinner part, we ended up with our smaller number, which was great.
Yeah. That's awesome. And if you could too, I know one of the questions I had is if they're streaming their wedding, how much what are they covering? Are they just covering the ceremony? Are they covering the whole day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had the ceremony covered. So right from the get-go of people showing up, which was really cool to watch as a couple afterwards, especially for myself, the bride. I was in the background, so I didn't get to see all that until after.
Yeah.
That was really cool to be able to see all of that. And then right through the ceremony and afterwards. So even Dave and I had a chance to go and say hello to the people on the screen. The service that we used, they were great. They wanted to bring in a screen so that not only could those at home see us, but we could see them as well. And so they were part of our guests there at the ceremony. So
it was a giant
yeah,
screen.
it was very cool. And this company had only done that. I think my understanding is they had only done it for business meetings before, and they really wanted to try it for a wedding. And so doing that with ours, we were totally open to that. That was awesome to be able to see my own brother who couldn't make it. I could see him on the screen, which was amazing. So that was really cool.
And then we have a recording of the ceremony now too, because the fact that it was live stream meant it was captured live and recorded, and so we can watch it over and over again that way. So
yeah.
And then plus we had this awesome photographer, which who made the
right?
yes.
No, it was awesome. So for us, we only did the ceremony. We didn't do the reception afterwards.
Did they offer it?
I think we talked about that.
Yeah, I think like we could have done anything.
Yeah.
And so
just how much
decided that the ceremony seemed like the thing that people would join live. And then we knew I was joking, but not like Krista obviously was our photographer and did an amazing job. And so the rest of the day people could follow it on when we were sharing things, or Krista was sharing things online or whatever. We had lots of other images for them that way, but they didn't live stream the ceremony.
The reception.
We should give them a shout out.
Reception. Yes, the ceremony, not the reception.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
We should give them the company a shout out. So that's WeStream. That's Kevin, and he's awesome. I highly recommended him out to all my clients this past year for that component. It just kind of takes the pressure off. You can easily do a Zoom with have a family member set up a computer and do a Zoom. But I think what stands apart with Kevin is, he's got a whole control system. He's got double cameras going. He's got the big screen, different options there. And also, he's streaming live to YouTube. So it's a lot easier for, especially the people that are more technically challenged, to be able to just click a link and follow and not have to log into Zoom.
Something. That's
right. We should probably mention the sound I was really impressed with the sound. So they used a couple different microphones, and then there was a couple different angles that they got of the ceremony. So watching it, you almost got a better view if you were at home than if you're at the actual ceremony, because you could see the different angles and you could hear so clearly. I was very impressed with that.
Yeah, and so for people that were not wanting to show up on Zoom or couldn't, or you have people from different generations that are more or less comfortable with things, then many people just watched it with the YouTube link instead, and that was great too.
Yeah.
Good. So, do you regret getting married during a pandemic?
No.
Okay, I was hoping you're going to yeah, no, like we were talking about it. As a matter of fact, the one thing we were just thinking about prepping for this conversation, because we hadn't really thought about it this way before, was, it's almost like for us, we kind of embraced the fact that it was in a pandemic. We didn't poke fun at the pandemic or anything, but we got married during a pandemic. That's the reality. So, we had bride and groom masks. We had a different style of wedding than we would have thought of. We
should mention the photo booth if I can really quickly. So we ended up doing a photo booth, and we had a company come in, Magic Mirror. It was awesome, but they couldn't offer props or anything. We still had to do it at a distance. So we ended up making, every couple had their own kit of props that they could then take up to the photo booth and get pictures taken. So it was a bit more work, but it actually added a personal flair, because Dave and I put together the props, and I made signs, and it was super fun, because we could spread out different types of props all on the tables, and so they had something extra there.
Now there was an element of luck too in all of this, because where we would have normally had our reception would have been a space big enough for our group, but too small for sort of an indoor COVID group. The fact that another wedding had canceled allowed us to move into a way bigger room and space everyone out and all that jazz. That was a stroke of luck for us, because otherwise we would, the one thing about it, I guess, would we have done it again or not done it again, it was great to work with the people we did, because everybody had to be amazingly flexible. And we had, for us, it was, we're going to get married on October 10th. We're going to get married on October 10th, you know, no matter what.
Yeah.
So we just knew that we have to keep being flexible. And even at the Pillar and Post, different people were off because of COVID that we had dealt with before. So we had to start over with a new person, and that person came back and that person was gone. Like, everything was constantly changing a lot. And as long as, I feel, if we were talking to someone else trying to decide, I think you just need to be, at least our experience was, being prepared for lots of unexpecteds, not letting them, you know, really disappoint you too much. Just continuing to know that it's important to be flexible and keep rethinking things, because no one can see 8 months away with COVID exactly how it's going to work, and sometimes even a month away.
Yeah, and just to be fluid.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think actually you just may put a thought in my head too. I just want to be clear to those who are watching here. We're just talking based on our experiences. We can't say for sure that, you know, your situation or your wedding will be able to turn out as great as some of these weddings did. We don't know what's going to happen in the next year. But we can tell you from experience, you know, during the different times of year, what it was like for these couples, and you know, then it might help you kind of get some insight. Okay. Andrea, do you mind going next?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, wonderful. So if you want to, again, just sort of tell us when was your wedding, where was it, how many people you had, did you have to move your wedding at all, what changes did you have to make, and do you regret it?
Yeah, so I got married on August 8th in St. Catharines. So it was about 3 weeks after we went into stage 3. So we were allowed to have 50 people for the ceremony. So we did. We had 50 people for the ceremony, and then we had 38 for dinner. Our original guest list was 240 people. So we definitely had to drastically change our numbers. And one of the reasons we picked to get married in St. Catharines was so all my family could come. And unfortunately, a lot of them had to get cut. So it did change a lot of the way we worked and what we did. So I definitely would have done it again. Looking back at it, we ranked what was the most valuable to us and what was our biggest priorities. And then we looked at, could we still get those or achieve those and complete those in the pandemic? And we were able to. But like Dave and Alicia said, we had to be very fluid. We didn't have confirmation on a lot of what was going on until 2 weeks before our wedding. So it definitely made it interesting. I would say to anybody going through this right now, don't let the little things stress you out, because they're going to, and it sucks. Looking back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, trying to figure out what meal I was having was such a stressor, but it didn't need to be. Like, I don't even remember what I ate. So I would say all those little things that you're picking up as stressors, just leave them, because there are things that are going to stress you out, and they're big. But there's a lot of little things that no one's going to really care about. So don't worry about it. Yeah, I would say, like, logistically wise, that's probably the biggest con for me during the pandemic. For example, we had to cancel our limo because we were doing pictures off site, and a lot of our friends were very cautious still because they were going into work or things like that. So we definitely had to make sure that we were providing a really comfortable and safe space for all of our friends. For example, we only had households sitting at a table. So for dinner, each of our tables only had 2 people, which they actually ended up loving because they didn't have to make weird talk with people they didn't know. Also, it felt like a date night that they didn't have to pay for. So it turned out really well in that aspect. And there were really a lot of great things as well to come from it. It's just, you have to kind of really just worry about the top priorities, and then the rest will fall into place, even if it's the day of the wedding, unfortunately.
Now, in your wedding, I think I recall you guys, your bridal party quarantined before together, right? Kind of
Yes.
like everyone did like a 2-week quarantine or something?
Yeah, all of our bridal party quarantined. They all got COVID tests, and then they quarantined for the 2 weeks after they got their COVID test, so that we were able to kind of feel safe before the wedding. And like I said, it was just due to some health, personally my own health concerns as well. So it did help us feel a lot more safe taking photos and things like that. But it was a challenge for sure. Getting your nails done before made it a little bit tough, but it was still great.
Now, your wedding actually was inside as well. So
Yes.
that was another big challenge, especially during that time, because like you said, the numbers weren't very high, and getting married inside was like, so what was that like for you? Because, you know, your bridal party had to wear masks up the aisle, all your guest seating had to wear masks. How was that?
Yeah, that was definitely an added layer to it. Up until probably 2 weeks before, we were told that we weren't allowed to have a first kiss because we were having to wear our masks. So there definitely was little things that kind of came into play, but it was just because nobody really understood the rules quite then. So after, about 2 weeks before the wedding, they said, okay, as long as you guys are up at the front by yourselves and there's not really a lot of people around you, you can take off your masks, but all of your guests have to leave their masks on, which I think helped our guests to feel comfortable inside a space because not a lot of them had really sat anywhere with a whole group of people at that point. So I do think it was nice that they were able to wear their masks, but it definitely added a layer of complexity due to safety concerns. We had to space all the chairs apart and things like that to try to help them feel safe. But I would say that was probably one of my bigger concerns. Luckily, the venue was able to have us seated outside for dinner, and it was a beautiful day. So that really helped us at dinner time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that's, you're kind of reminding me there, like yours was one of the first weddings that I shot after the lockdown. And so it was very new at that time. So I think a lot of vendors were making a lot of different mistakes, and there's just like not a lot of information out there or direction for people in the wedding industry knowing how to handle these weddings. You know, but I think because like even like your first dance, you had to do it at the altar.
Yeah.
Where
And
what later on in the summer had a normal first dance and it wasn't an issue.
And I honestly loved that. We also couldn't have a daughter's father dance or mother son dance. So we did that in our hotel room before the ceremony. And it felt really intimate that way, which was awesome. So I did actually, that's something that I would say was a pro to me.
Awesome. Ooh, I love that. Okay. So now let's move on to Ben and Liz. Again, same questions. When was your wedding? Where was it? How many people did you have? Did you have to move or make any big changes to your wedding? And do you regret doing it during a pandemic?
So we got married on November 14th. So pretty much right when Niagara decided to change all of the rules.
The day before.
The day before our wedding. And we didn't move the date. We said a couple of our friends moved their weddings in May to like later in the year. And we made the decision at that time, we were said November 14th, that's the day we're getting married, no matter what, whatever form it takes, that's what we're gonna do. We ended up being really lucky that COVID kind of held out just long enough for us to squeak it in. And we had 50 people at Legends on the Niagara, the golf course, 50 people for the ceremony, and then 50 people for the reception inside as well. It turned out fantastic, and it was pretty much because we had the most amazing team of vendors around us. Legends on the Niagara was like an unbelievable venue. It turned out to be like the perfect day, better than we could have possibly imagined going into it. We originally wanted like 140 people. That's how many we had actually sent out invites for. But the space could hold, I think 200, 250. Yeah. So we had a larger space, so we didn't have to move the wedding and where it was going. We actually could fit 50 people in the same space that we picked. So that was a huge plus for us. So we're giving any advice, like for COVID, pick a bigger venue. Like they're hurting for business too. So like pick a big venue, you can have 50 people in there. Turned out to be such a blessing. And then Elise at Legends on the Niagara was in constant communication with us. Anytime things change, we changed the seating plan, like the arrangement of the tables, all the way up until the last day. And the rules in Niagara changed literally like 24 hours before the wedding. And we redid the whole seating plan when we got there at the venue.
Yeah, we're from Toronto.
Yeah, so we were driving into Niagara, and Like we redid the whole thing. We had 8 tables to start, and then by the end of it all, we had 15 or 16 tables. But what was great is we had Joanie Decor as our decorator, which was probably the best decision we made in all of this. And then they just showed up with twice as much decorations, and they were so flexible throughout the whole thing, and they took all the stress off of us, and it was absolutely fantastic.
They reprinted all the seating, like the table seating placement cards and everything, like at 2 a.m. the night before, because like everything changed, and we had all these extra tables now because all of like households had to sit together. And if we had friends that didn't show up the night before, we were like, you have to sit alone. Sorry, like I don't know what to tell you.
So we actually
had, how you did your singles tables.
Yeah, our singles table was literally
3 tables touching corners, socially distanced. So they were alone, but not alone.
Yeah. And then we had couple tables like facing each other, so 2-person tables. We had some larger tables that had like my family at it and like Liz's family, but it was completely different than anything I'd ever seen before. And the creativity that the venue had, that our decorators had, that everybody had was just amazing throughout the whole process.
Ben is really good at wedding planning, because when he said like we talked to the venue, he talked to the venue. I didn't know what the seating chart looked like until I showed up after we got married. So
yeah, it was it turned out fantastic, and we did a live stream as well, and that was we didn't have like a company come in, we just had a Zoom call. We had the laptop at the end of the aisle, and then we had one of our friends hold up a phone and videoed the whole thing, and it turned out great, and people could hear the whole reception, our whole ceremony perfectly. We were able to share the day with so much more of my family than probably would have been there originally, and it was perfect. And then we checked in with them at the end of the day, and Krista snapped some great photos of us checking in with everyone on Zoom, and it was perfect.
And I would love if you guys could let's shout out to Shane, your DJ.
Oh yeah.
That was like the funnest COVID wedding ever.
So we told Shane to come up with a game, because so obviously there's no dancing. Yeah. So we knew we were going to do like bar style trivia, and every table was a team. So we printed off all the stuff for that. But like during dinner, in between trivia and stuff, we were like, Shane, we need you to come up with something that's like COVID safe, that will be fun. So what did he call it?
It is like name that tune, and people would come up, he'd play a song, they'd try and guess it, and then their table would have to guess it, and it was all like people were laughing like crazy. It was fantastic. But then at the end we did bar style trivia. Like, what's one thing that people can't do right now is they can't go to a bar for trivia. So we just made our own trivia that was slightly related to us and slightly related to people in the room and things that we like to do. Like we had Blue Jays trivia. And so we just had like it was like an hour and a half long trivia session. And some people after the wedding said that they liked this wedding more than some of the other ones they'd been to, because they felt engaged like the whole time throughout the wedding. Yeah, and if they weren't big dancers, they were like, this is great. I was entertained the whole night. And one of the greatest moments for me was like, my biggest fear was like, how are we going to keep people entertained? They're sitting down for 5 hours, right? Like what are we going to do for all this time? And we were lucky, like the people that gave speeches gave great speeches. It was our entertainment essentially for the night. And we had the trivia. And then at the end of the night, we had buses to come and pick people up, like large Niagara City buses. Yeah. And I said in the mic, like, hey, the buses are here. So if anybody wants to go, like, you're more than like you can. The bar's open for a little bit longer, but you can go if you want. And not a single person stood up.
No one moved.
Nobody moved. Not even nobody.
We had to kick them out.
Yeah, we had to end up kicking them out, and everybody was having fun for the whole time. So my fear was relieved at that point, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That was super fun. Actually, and you just made me think of something too. I think all 3 of you guys did full day weddings. Like, you didn't make changes to your weddings. You didn't shorten it. You didn't cut it, even though your guest list went down. Does anyone want to comment like on why you felt that it was important to still take your photography, for instance, and document it the whole day?
Well, for us, I mean, the people had made, we kind of felt like people were coming all the way there. And so we just wanted to, I don't know, out of respect and of them wanting to be there with us, we just wanted to make a full day of it. But it was really casual. And people said it had a different feel. It's the same thing you guys were mentioning. At the end, we literally had the pillar and post staff very kindly like had to like boot us. Like we literally got security had to like, bridegroom and the last few people.
We weren't doing anything.
We were
just hanging out.
hanging out. But it was like people wanted to stay till the bitter
Yeah.
end because people were just being more engaged. By the way, speaking of shout outs, local band that we had, Laurel and Holly. So Laurel Minnis is an amazing performer down in the Niagara region, and they were phenomenal too because we couldn't do a dance band and we didn't want to do sort of just kind of quiet loungy music that was going to be too relaxed, too chill, I guess, for the vibe of the evening. And they were just phenomenal too. So doing like you guys did changing it up from a dance party, like we were able to do a dance in front of people, which was fun for us. But then everyone else was just enjoying like checking out their take on different songs and milling about and doing the magic mirror and just not dancing, but socializing like it was a big pub in a much larger room than normal. And it was really, really fun.
Yeah, it was great.
It was also important to us to not, like we still wanted our wedding day. And I think that was part of the reason why we still wanted to be there. We wanted to spend it with our friends and family as much as we possibly could. And I think we wanted to have all those photos and we loved our photos. Like we made a book pretty much within 2 weeks of getting them back. And I sent out all my thank you cards within a week of getting all the photos. Like,
oh yeah.
I think like it was just something exciting for people, right? Like we'd all been in such a drought and such like a rut for so long. So there was like, we all tailgated in the parking lot for like 4 hours. My husband didn't come to bed till like 5 a.m. So like, I think it was just something that we all, like everyone needed was to have some fun. And I think that was like really, really helpful. And to have that fun was having that full day wedding.
We heard that. Sorry, go ahead, guys.
Our wedding was actually the third wedding we've been to the past year because both of our best friends, Ben's best friend was going to get married in May. My best friend was going to get married in June, and they both had to push it, but they were considering canceling. And we were like, no, like we are not going to cancel our wedding. So you guys also shouldn't cancel your wedding because I think people really need this. And they were like, yeah, come to think of it, like we also really need this. So we kind of all like egged each other on to keep it going. And then like ours was like the end of the year and it was awesome.
That's great. That's great. Alicia, you were going to say something?
Oh, just the part that we heard that we had heard the same thing that people said in a year like we've been having, this thing was so needed. Like a lot of people made sort of similar comments to that being able to come to something like this just was so heartwarming for them and was such a positive thing in a year when people weren't able to feel that same sense of positivity much during the year. So that was really nice for us to hear. And then on the other side, it was interesting because we were talking about the room that we kind of lucked into. That was from a wedding where they had a particular vision. I think whether it's other family traditions, culture, or whatever, that a wedding is going to be a certain way. And I think if I was speaking to someone and was saying, should I or shouldn't I go? It's like it kind of depends on whether your idea is to be super flexible and do the kind of things that we're talking about in this call. Or if you really have the particular picture in mind about how it needs to look, then that's kind of hard to do in COVID because everything needs to be up in the air. Everything needs to be flexible and differently, right? So at least that's what we found.
I had been telling people that it was so, because I never had like a dream wedding in mind. So after all this, they're like, oh, like, did it like pan out as you thought? I was like, well, I didn't think anything. So I feel like I saved myself a lot of stress by not worrying about what it could or could not be because I just was rolling with it at that point.
I think, my biggest thing that I've been telling my couples is the 3 things that you need to consider when you're looking at if you should postpone your wedding or not is, are you comfortable cutting your guest list? That's the big one. Because from my perspective, I didn't see a lot of huge interruptions or changes to the weddings that I shot this year. I feel like they were pretty much like a regular wedding, with the exception of the occasional wearing of masks by the couple and the bridal party. My team, we always wore masks during the weddings. for our safety and your safety. And that's totally fine. I'm totally comfortable doing that. I think, but people should know, one of our questions was, actually, maybe I'll read it now. So Jen had asked, I just quickly wanted to ask you, for your 2020 weddings, were you able to take pictures of the bridal party and family of the bride and groom without them wearing masks on? To be clear, I know how important masks are for the safety of everyone, and I wear my mask everywhere right now. So I more mean people that were in your quote unquote bubble would be able to take pictures without masks. I would love photos to put on my wall one day. I fear that if my family was wearing masks in all my pictures, I would look back and wish I postponed. Lots to think about. I'm asking you more than all my other vendors because you have been the most involved throughout the process and I care most about your advice. Oh, that's so sweet. So yeah, like guys, you can attest to this. You did not have to wear masks for your photos.
Yep.
A couple of us, actually I think all of us maybe did. Yeah, we all did at least like a photo with the mask and the big FU to COVID.
Photos, yes.
So I think the key point there is like it depends where you are as well. Like if you're taking family photos outside, then the restrictions are a little bit looser when you're taking family photos outside and with your friends and stuff. But the key there is to also talk with your vendor and your venue. It's like, okay, if we're inside here, can we do this? Like to have that open communication with your venue is extremely important. And that's like that's something I would talk very early on with your venue about. Like, are we going to be able to do this? And if that's a deal breaker, find out as early as you can about that kind of thing.
Yeah, because originally they were going to have our whole wedding party wear masks indoors. And I was like, no, I'm not having my ceremony with the mask on. So we're going to do it outside. And I don't care if it's negative 10 degrees. And they were like, well, okay, like maybe we'll do it inside then. And like, you guys will be far enough back so no one has to wear a mask. I was like, yes.
I think too, it's about the comfort of your family and friends. Some people, they weren't comfortable taking off their masks, and that was totally okay. I also had my grandmothers who are 90 years old there, and I do have one photo, but without a mask on, but some of them are with masks on, and actually some of them are my favorite. So I think that at the end of the day, like, it's still such a memorable day, and it's still so special to have those people there. And if they're not comfortable without a mask on, like, as long as they're there, I think at the end of the day, like, I didn't care, because it just really meant something to me to have them there. And you never know what's going to happen with COVID. So that was my biggest driver. Like, friends and family that meant so much to me, I really wanted them there. And having grandmothers in a nursing home and things like that, you never really knew what that was going to bring. So having them there meant so much more to me, whether or not they had to wear a mask.
Yeah, we got some cute candids. One of my favorite photos is your grandmother coming up and you reaching your hand out to her.
Yes, me too. I have that printed. Like, I love that photo. So I think that's the thing. Like, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you're just so happy that those people are there and you see them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like I had a lot of, sometimes the groups would come up, or the parents, and they say, you know, do we need to wear a mask? Should we take our mask off? And I will never tell someone to take their mask off. It is totally up to you. It is your comfort level, and I will not enforce the bride and groom to tell other people to take their masks off. It, like you said, it's totally on everybody's comfort level. But for the most part, I feel that the bridal party for the day are pretty comfortable being mask off for the photos, and then bride and groom, obviously, all day, every day, we can just not be wearing masks for your photos. That's not an issue. So I think when it comes down to, at the end of the day, yeah, you will definitely get some pictures printed without masks, but there will be the occasional photo, like Andrea said, where you might have masks on, but it's also, we're here to document your day in an authentic way. And the truth is, you're getting married during a pandemic, and that's okay. And that's going to be part of your story, you know, for good or bad, you know, and that's really what it is at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I think something that Dave and I decided on as a couple going into saying yes to having our wedding when we did, was knowing that the pandemic was going to be part of the wedding story. So having different, you know, the signage I mentioned earlier, and we made it not to poke fun at the situation, because for sure we wanted to make sure family and friends that were attending in person were comfortable with it. and everything that we were doing. So making sure everything was done safely, but also having just a titch of fun with signage and knowing that, you know, when they arrived, they would arrive with their own mask, but we had a wedding theme mask for them to wear if they wanted to.
Yeah, made by your mom, or
Yeah,
my mother-in-law now, who decided that was a fun way for her to get involved in the whole thing, because she sews. It's like, well, I'll make some wedding themed masks, which was really fun.
Yeah.
Andrea's mom, was it your mom or your mother-in-law?
It was also my mother-in-law that made she made the bridal party all matching masks. So yeah, it was making the best out of what you had, right? I think that was the biggest point.
Totally.
Yeah, my mom's mask was all like bedazzled and like super nice, and she went to the nines on her own one. It was great, and we had matching ones for the whole bridal party. It was great. The photos look good with the masks on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun to walk around with a bride and groom mask for a couple of weeks afterwards too. So we got a lot of people congratulating us when we're walking in stores and stuff. We can let it if we extended it. Yeah.
That's cute. So one of the other things too that I've been telling the clients is that you have to be prepared that there's going to be guests. Obviously, out of town guests will not be able to come. So I know, like, I've had some weddings that have moved because they have family from out of country that will not be able to be there, and it's really important for them to have those people with them. Did you guys experience some of that? How did you overcome that? You know, with the travel restrictions and everything, really just was it the Zoom and just kind of having people involved in the Zoom, or you know?
Yeah, I think for us it was, again, the fact when we made the decision to stream our wedding, that was a way that really alleviated that stress for a lot of people. We were able to have those that had already declined, or those that were sitting on the fence deciding whether they could or were willing to or not. That made the decision easier for them because they could still be there, and really took the stress off of us as the couple. We could just be at ease knowing that people were going to be there, whether they were going to be in person or viewing it from home, and that was a huge stress reliever for us when we made that decision.
Yeah. Okay, and then also, like, the third thing I tell clients to consider is not having a dance party. Obviously, dancing's been a big thing. Live music can also be restricted. I know that Dave and Alicia got to have a live band, so that's awesome. But I know, like, as my husband's a musician, he hasn't been able to play in over a year or in a year. So, you know, Ben and Liz, you guys had like a super rad DJ who's really entertaining. You guys all really found different creative ways to entertain your guests. Do you think that your guests were bothered by, or were you bothered by the fact that you couldn't have that big dance party that's traditional for weddings? Or do you think it was actually better that you were forced to do something a little bit different?
Yeah, we had the best, like, we had a great DJ. Sound of Harmony was like phenomenal, and he did the best with what he could do, right? He was entertaining, he was engaging the guests, he had the kissing game going, and then also doing the trivia was a way to just keep people engaged like the entire night. At my friend's wedding, I actually hosted like a Family Feud style game at the end of their wedding, which was really, really fun, and a way to get everybody involved. And we did like the wedding party versus all the tables, and it was super fun. It was wedding themed. But yeah, like, we didn't miss the dance party. We would have loved to have it.
Like, we should clarify, we had hired all of our vendors other than Joanne Wedding Decor prior to COVID. We had put down deposits, we had everything lined up like way in advance. We basically were like walking around being like, we are done wedding planning. And then the pandemic hit and we were like, oh shit, like, what do we do? So we had talked to Shane and we were like, we don't want to like unhire you because we know that you need to work too. And I'm sure you're losing out on so many weddings this year. So we worked together with him to change what we had, because we had originally asked for a photo booth and kind of like already paid for it. So instead of that, we got up lighting and some other stuff. So we kind of made it work.
Yeah. So but it was great. We didn't really miss out on the dance party. Like it, and like I said before, some people liked it better. Like, honestly, some of the guests were like, this is great. I had a great time, and it was good.
I think it's definitely one of those trends that we'll probably see move forward in weddings, like even after the pandemic's done.
Oh, yeah.
doing some different things as opposed to just relying on a DJ and a dance party. And it pushes us as vendors to get creative with how we offer our services too, which is kind of cool.
I think for us, like we weren't set on having a dance party. And I think that might be also a big influence. Like if you're super set on having a huge dance party and that's all you want all night, it may not work out, and it may not be one of those things. Like I said again, it's not on your top priority. It wasn't for us, so it was okay that we lost that. But if it is one of your top priorities, it might be harder to still maintain the wedding you want, not being able to have that. But yeah, I didn't miss it whatsoever. I actually enjoyed it more that we didn't have a dance party, because I do not love dancing as much. And we had hired just a like bar band to play, and I love them, and I wish they had been able to, but at that time we weren't allowed to have live bands.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question that came in from Rebecca. She's wondering what the 10-person limit looked like. So obviously you guys all had the opportunity to have more than 10 people. But this question could kind of go based on that. Were your vendors included in that limit? So the number of people that you were limited, did you have to count your vendors with that?
Yeah, we had to, like, Krista, you and your assistant counted as 2 people in the 50.
Shane counted as 1.
Shane actually didn't.
Really?
The DJ didn't count because he was behind like a plexiglass screen. And so he was technically he would have been in the 50, I think, because we had a couple people drop out at the last minute. Shane actually didn't count in the 50. And then the staff at the venue also didn't count. Like the serving staff, they didn't count. So we had essentially 47 people, our friends and our family, show up to the wedding, plus the 2 photographers.
Actually, that reminds me too, maybe a good point for people who are planning their weddings. I did get in a little bit of trouble by your venue, Ben and Liz, because we actually had 3 of us when we showed up, because at the time we had 2 photographers and my assistant, but it was only my assistant and I staying for your dinner.
Yeah.
So they were upset because they're like, no, we only have you for 2. I was like, sorry.
Yeah. And those are like the little things that kind of slip through the cracks.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're in your mind, you're like, wow, you're counting more your guests for dinner. You're not thinking of throughout the day.
And at the end of the day, 1 person backed out, so we were still compliant. So it all worked out.
There you go.
That's one of the ebbs and flows of
Yeah.
doing a wedding. Is the ups and downs, including the numbers, constantly.
Yeah, and even sometimes, right? The people at the Pillar and Post were amazing. In particular, Tara, who was our host. Tara was incredible in terms of her flexibility and stuff. But we also realized, and maybe it'll be different in 2021 for people planning, but in 2020, oftentimes they didn't even really know the rules. So this question about who counts and who doesn't count, they would say, probably this, but let's get back to you. Remember that?
Yeah, they were figuring things out just as we were, and we found that along with our vendors too. So communication was key, keeping it open and keeping in touch with them, especially as you got closer, finding things out a week before, a day before, that would change things. It was just, communication is absolutely key.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, you guys have all touched on this. Like, really, it's about communicating with your venue. Every venue, what I noticed myself was that every venue was very different. I actually had 2 weddings that I attended where people were blowing bubbles at the bride and groom as they were walking back down the aisle, which I was like really shocked that was even allowed. But and then like your wedding, Dave and Alicia, you had a band, right? And I hadn't seen that, so that was surprising to me. So it's like different venues are, allowing sort of different things, and it really just depends on working with them. And staying on top of them, I think, is really important as far as communication. How did you guys feel when the pandemic hit? How did you feel your communication level was with your vendors? Did you really have to push? Did they come to you? And what are some like really key questions you think that couples should be asking their vendors during this time?
Krista, you were the only one that came to me. So I appreciated that a lot. I think that was like one of the reasons not one of the reasons, but I think that just like added to your level of awesomeness, was that you did come to me first. A lot of them didn't, and a lot of them wouldn't give me answers even when I asked. They'd wait 3 weeks to get back to me, or they just wouldn't get back to me and say, we'll get back to you after we've dealt with other people, which was very understandable because I was getting married about 6 months after the pandemic hit. But it was hard. I would say the biggest question I would ask is, what happens if I can't have the guest list that I had intended when I originally signed up to do this wedding? And that goes for all of your vendors, because regardless if you're getting hair and makeup, at one point I wasn't going to be able to get makeup done because makeup artists weren't yet working. So it was asking, like, do I get my deposit back yet? Or do I not get a deposit back? Like, what does that mean if I can't have that? So I think that's the biggest question that I would start by asking, at least.
Yeah, our venue, like they were great. Elise like contacted us from Legends, and we talked about the financials, and we're like, okay, we're very likely not going to be able to have 100. So what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for our minimum spend? Like, what does that mean? And they actually gave us a huge break on all of that, and it was extremely flexible, and it fit exactly with what our new plan was. But not every venue is like that. Like, we've heard some horror stories about venues
asking for a second deposit.
Asking for a second deposit, and not giving back the first one, like that. Like, all those types of things. Those are the questions that you need to ask at the beginning. It's like, okay, if this changes, what does that mean in terms of the cost? And like, a lot of that is a huge factor when planning these weddings. Like, you don't want to outlay an insane amount of money. It's already expensive. You don't want to put out more than you have to. So having those conversations and asking those questions up front. And then the last thing for us, and it was like the one major thing that we think that is like having a decorator for some of those small things. That was the best investment we made, because they have more stuff. So if things change, they can just pull stuff out of everywhere. And Joanny Decor, like, they saved us on the day, and it was fantastic. And just having a vendor that's just flexible and engaged in your process is hugely important. And like Krista was very, you came to us very early, and that we cannot appreciate that enough. And just the open communication that you had with us.
Yeah, all of our vendors were very communicative. Yeah, we had no issues. We had no issues getting answers from people. If they did say, like, we don't know right now, but we'll get back to you, like, it wasn't a super long time, and everything was understandable, right? Like, they don't know the answers, we don't know the answers. Who knows? No one knows. But everything worked out. We didn't lose any money. Nobody like withheld our deposit. Like, we didn't have to push anything over. Everything was fine.
We had one vendor held a deposit, but that wasn't the big issue. But what was interesting is just even with the pillar and post, in terms of flexibility maybe at one of the peaks of the pandemic, I guess in the spring, Tara, who I mentioned, was gone for a while, and the only person working at the hotel, or one of the only people working at the hotel doing group bookings, registration, etc., was their head chef, who was also their sommelier. And so when we had to change,
our dinner plans and numbers, and
she's like, "Perfect, you got me. I'm the chef. I'm the sommelier. Let's do this."
So she helped us plan our wedding dinner. It was great.
Yeah.
No, but communication. We went in constantly with our vendors, but especially Pillar and Post too, with just our contingency plans, I guess is what I call them, because it was, if we can stay at 50, if we have to go down to 25, what if we have to go down to 10, what if? It was like all these scenarios. We had question after question that we just kept, not that we had to make that decision at that time, but I think, Ben, you were saying it was just asking those questions. What if we do, then what happens? And just being prepared to protect yourself that way.
Yeah, I would tell people, like now that we've planned a wedding, I never want to do it again. But now that we've done that, I would say, pandemic or not, have a contingency plan in place, because anything can happen. It doesn't have to be a pandemic. It can be something else catastrophic. Like, just have a contingency plan. The number is like, you're at 50. What if I have to go down to 25? What if we have to go down to 10? What if you become available day of? Like, what if? Like, absolutely. I know it's stressful, but it's better to have that in place, moving like right from the beginning, rather than waiting to the last minute and then being like, uh-oh, what do we do now?
Yeah, the biggest problem that we had on our day was that our my brother showed up in the wrong suit. Like that was the only problem. And like for a year where there was COVID, that was okay. You know what? Like if that's the biggest problem we have in a day, that's fine.
I feel like a lot of the weddings were like that. Like all the little kind of missteps that happen throughout the day. It's like, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
COVID happened. So who cares?
Are we here? Are we healthy? Is it
Yeah.
happening? Yes.
I definitely had that phrase as well. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm over it. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like, we're getting married. That's all that really matters today. And like, literally anything could happen. And a lot of it did, but it was just nice to like be like, whatever, we're getting married today. Who cares? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's flexibility at a whole new level.
Yeah, like we were driving into Niagara-on-the-Lake on the day before the wedding at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something, because Doug Ford was going to be doing an announcement that day. And so we're tuning into the radio, listening to the announcement, trying to decide whether we're going to be like arriving and then calling people saying, don't come. Like, you know, wouldn't have been that way, but it's just, that was the mindset the whole time.
But we knew it could have been. So we had to be flexible to know that anything can happen. And at least we knew that we were going to get married. We weren't sure who or how many or how it was going to happen. So.
Well, and I think Dave and Alicia and Andrea, I think your weddings were, well, I know they were before the color code scheme, I believe.
Yes, just before.
Yeah. So, but Ben, I think yours, that's when you were talking about like the day before, basically your wedding is when they implemented the new color code.
Yeah, it was like about 2 weeks before they implemented the color code, but Niagara specifically changed the rules. Like there was like a local Niagara rule that was put in place the day before our wedding. That's what changed everything. And like we could never have predicted that.
What color was it when you guys got married, Ben?
I think it was orange, but it was also, the rule that they put in was more restrictive than the level that they were. So they were actually going above and beyond with the household table rule. And that was the key in all of it. But they kept the amount of people. That was the one number we always looked at on any of these color coding like levels. It was like, how many people can we have inside? Like that's the number one number that we looked at.
Yeah, I mean that was always a risk with Niagara Falls because it's a tourist destination for people within Ontario, like people coming from Toronto and like we're from Toronto, Peel, et cetera, and they noticed an uptick of people coming from regions that were in like red, like our region, and they were like, you know what, we need to take these extra measures to keep the people of Niagara safe. So like we get it, that's fine. We did have to explain a couple times to people who were like, oh, did you move your wedding so it was outside of Toronto? And we were like, no, don't be rude. It was always in Niagara.
Oh, that's good. And I think that's important too. It's like it's not just the provincial, right? Like you said, like there could be changes within the regions as well, or specific conditions within the regions that need to be abided by. Can you guys give advice on like sort of different websites or where you went to get your information to stay on top of it?
I actually emailed like the city of St. Catharines to figure it out, because I live in Guelph and we had been under regulated masks for a while at that point, but not every district had actually been regulated masks. So we had friends that weren't used to wearing masks going wherever they were going. And things like when we were discussing, like, could we have a first kiss? I was going to the city, and that's who really helped me out understanding the rules and what we could and couldn't do.
Yeah, I think for us, we definitely checked out the city's website, but really we leaned a lot on like leaning closer to the wedding. We leaned a lot on Pillar and Post and what restrictions they knew of at that point. Because again, just mentioning Tara's name, she was awesome at just saying whether she knew or she didn't know yet. She was very open about that. She would just say, well, here's what we're working under right now. But it could change, or we don't know that yet. And so that was really helpful. I don't think we checked any other websites.
No, because I mean, in the end, also they were pretty clear that there's some of it was. I mean, you guys were mentioning that different venue, or maybe it was you, Chris, saying different venues were doing different things, and so they were kind of mindful of the fact that there was a bit of open to interpretation in some of these things. So some of it was what public health was telling them or the city was telling them, and some of it was what they were deciding to do or what they, as a management team, what they wanted to do. So yeah, so we just kind of reiterating that point of staying in constant communication with people so that we could keep changing it right up to the day of, pretty much.
Yeah, for us, Legends on the Niagara is part of Niagara Parks, so they're like closely related to the government. So they had a nice inside track into like what was going on and some of the interpretations. So they were very, very helpful and very communicative throughout the whole process.
That's awesome. Okay, so just kind of doing a, if I knew then what I know now, what advice would you give your past selves, before your wedding days, having lived it?
Like, do it.
Get married.
Yeah, get married.
Do it. Do it for love. Don't do it for the party. Do it for love. Yeah. Just get married.
Yeah, just get it done. Do it.
I would definitely echo that. I would say don't let the little stressors stress you out because it's not worth it. And I would just say, like, make sure you're doing what's going to make you happy at the end of the day. Like, if you're going to look back and say, I wish I didn't do that, then don't do that. Make sure you're doing exactly what you want to do and what's going to bring you the most joy, because that's really what's the most important.
Yeah, if your goal is to get married on that specific date, and that's going to happen whether you have 5 people or 50 or what have you, then just to echo what Ben said, just do it.
Yeah, fun day.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm really glad that we did it.
Yeah.
Because it was really stressful, but it was worth it.
So speaking of the stress of it all, do you guys have some advice on how couples can de-stress?
Get lots of massages. I think I had like 9 massages this year. So
Any good therapist numbers you want to give out?
And I would say try to make it fun. Like, I think what we would try to do is like try to do a date night and then like add a little bit of the planning aspect to that date night, but not let it overwhelm it, because I think at the end of the day, it can get super overwhelming with so many unknowns. And if that's all you're focusing on, you're both going to be stressed and you can fight or you can get upset about it. And so just trying to do it in small pieces. Don't overwhelm yourself. It's not worth it. And just take what you can and still have fun with each other in the process.
Yeah, and echoing that, like we said at the end of it, is like when we were all done, of course it was amazing, and then we were like, now what are we going to plan? So trying to make the whole thing about planning it part of the whole experience and keeping the fun and all of that was
Absolutely.
Yeah, we loved planning it.
And I don't think I can stress enough how much stress was alleviated for me personally, but I think for both of us when we decided to stream the wedding. That was just it took so much pressure off, because then the day would be whatever it ended up being, but we knew that people could still tune in and join us, even if virtually. So that was a huge stress reliever.
Yeah, for us, one of the greatest things we did is we surrounded ourselves with a great team of vendors, and like little things that came up, we didn't even hear about them. Like we trusted them, they trusted us, they were engaged in the process, and that's what removed all of our stress, is that, we had people that had our back and we knew it, and we didn't skimp out. We got a great team and it worked out perfectly.
Yeah. We also, from the beginning of wedding planning, between us, we decided the things that we wanted to do and the things that we didn't want to do. We really broke it up. Like, it was very even. I would say at sometimes even Ben was doing more than I was, because I was just like, no, I can't handle this, but I can handle this. I'm going to do this. And I'm just going to leave you in charge of that. And like, I didn't stress about what he was doing, because like that was going to make it more stressful and not fun. Like I will tell you this, and I will admit this, like I did not like planning a wedding. And I have other friends who felt the same. Everybody thinks that like women love wedding planning. And I'm like, no, that is a misconception. Do not say that. So, one of the biggest stressors for me outside of us planning it together was my family were really, really worried that it was just going to be a disaster. And I was like, why would you say that? They were like, oh, you have to push it. I'm like, no, I don't have to do anything. Like, we're going to get married regardless, even if it's just like my mom and my stepdad and my dad and my stepmom and Ben's parents. Like, that's enough. That's enough. Like, that's fine. It's going to be fine. And one of my family members was always just like, no, you have to push it. You have to push it. It's going to be too, like, you're going to be too stressed. I'm like, you are stressing me out by telling me that I have to do something, and I want nothing to do with that. So, our parents didn't help us plan at all. We told them to go away. Like,
I think it's just, you know, do what fits the couple, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, it's your decision. You're the team that needs to get it done, and you have to trust each other.
You're the people that are getting married, and you're the ones who have to stick it out. So just do what you want to do.
And like you said, choose vendors you can trust as well.
Yeah.
To, like, have your back and to take care of you on that day.
Yeah. I think another point that just came to mind there was communicating with our guest list when we did decide to move forward. We did that. We did virtual invites, like just email invites, but that gave us the ability, which I think people were leaning towards doing more anyways, regardless of the pandemic, but that gave us more flexibility in keeping in communication with them, and also whether it was letting them know what we were doing to keep it safe, letting them know that we were aware, we're not just going into this blind, we're going into this with the knowledge of what's going on, and making sure that we're doing it in the safest way possible, and that totally understood if people chose not to come or to come. And we just kept in communication with them a lot more than I think we would have had it not been a pandemic wedding.
Yeah, a couple of emails describing how the food was going to be done, how things were going to operate, just so that they would be like, oh, okay, it's just not a free-for-all. It's not like you're like being irresponsible or reckless. You guys have actually thought this through. I feel more comfortable coming. And then also knowing that there was a couple people, right, that it was very difficult for them to tell us that, like, friends or family members that who couldn't come for COVID reasons. For them, it was very emotional for them to have to break that to us, and for us to try and tell them it's okay, it's not a problem, like, you're not, you know, there's nothing to feel badly about it, and even more so, you can join us online now. So that kind of emotion, we might have not felt it possibly as much as some of the guests that were coming did, as they were trying to decide, should I or shouldn't I come, you know? So trying to keep that in mind for them too is something that we realized as it got closer that we needed to do.
That's a great point. I know from talking to a lot of my couples, like, a lot of people backed out at the last minute, you know, some of the day of, just deciding that they just couldn't be there. They just didn't want to risk it. And you're going to have to come into that sort of running into those fears amongst everybody. Everyone's got different views, different opinions on the pandemic. A lot of people feel very strongly about it. A lot of people are divided right now on certain topics related to the pandemic. So I think that's a great point, is like just keeping that communication and being clear and concise about how the things are going to run during your day, so people can make their own decisions, and being okay with letting it go if your sister decides she doesn't want to show up, you know, or your brother or your grandmother or whoever, right? You know, as much as you want them to be there, you have to respect their need to be safe and feel safe as well. And try not to take it too personally or too much to heart, I think, is the big takeaway. Did you guys have wedding websites as well? Because I think that's also a really good tip.
Yes, I think along with the emails, we had a wedding website that kind of gave all the information, kind of said exactly what our safety protocols would be, and what our expectations of our guests were. We found that trying to make the environment as safe as possible for everyone, and then if people wanted to break that, that was on their choice, rather than creating an environment that wasn't safe and then the guests having to make it their level of safety.
Yeah. Was there a place where you guys went to for resources on how to communicate those things, or did you just kind of make it up on your own?
We used the not.com, so everything was pretty easy to.
Did they have COVID stuff there for you though?
No, not COVID stuff specific. We really got that from the information we got from our vendors.
Yeah, we learned how we got invited to 2 other weddings, so we just learned from them and how they dealt with us, and then we like tried to improve and just make it better. So we cheated. Yeah.
Our wedding website did have like and I forget what it was, but it was actually amazing. With Joy was our wedding website. And it actually did have like a verbiage you could add that was like a COVID verbiage. And it was just like, it would like pop down from the top of the website. It was actually really awesome. I would highly recommend that wedding website to anyone too, because it allows you to pick different groups. So for example, like we could pick like one group saw this message and another group saw this message. And we did have like a couple tiers of like, these people are 100% invited. These people are we hope to invite, but we don't think, or we think we'll be able to if it's under 50. These are the people that are over 50. So we were able to have different messages on the website depending who you were, which was really awesome.
That's cool. Okay, so is there any other final thoughts? Any other things that we didn't cover that you think might be, important, or that couples might be thinking of right now?
Don't put your life on hold just because it's a pandemic.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just get married. Even if you can't have a reception now, you can still have a reception sometime in the future. Like I didn't box up my wedding dress after I got it cleaned because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wear this again. I love it. And I want to have another party where we can have more people and dancing or whatever. We just can't have it yet. And that's fine. I'm willing to wait.
Now, what I envision is like a huge dance party in like 2022, maybe, that we have like 6 brides, everyone shows up, all in their wedding dresses. Like, that's what I'm thinking, but like, who knows?
That's awesome.
I think it's your day. Make it your day. Do what you need to do. If you do need to put it on hold, like I have a couple friends that have put their wedding on hold and gotten pregnant because they didn't want to put their life on hold. And that's okay too. I think just do what you need to do to make yourself happy. And at the end of the day, the people that you love and care about are really going to be there to support you. And the people that are going to judge you, or the people that are not going to be happy about it, they're people that probably you don't want their opinion, or they shouldn't be there anyway. So really at the end of the day, just make it about you and the people you love.
Amazing. Dave and Alicia, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, echoing everything that everybody else said, but also we really came together. That would be my advice to any couple, is the way that Dave and I did it. We just decided what was important to us, and it was that we get married. So whether there's a dinner or no matter what it looks like, we're getting married that day. And then so everything else was just icing on the cake when the day actually came, and knowing that, yeah, not to sweat the small stuff. Don't worry about that. Just know if you decide to move forward with it, then know that you're getting married, and no matter what else comes your way, you can deal with it.
Know that you're getting married, and it's possible. It's possible to have a successful wedding during a pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah, and that it's not somehow like a sort of lesser than a good. It's like it was an amazing wedding, like you would expect. I will love it. Love looking back at the pictures, and it's like a beautiful day that we'll never forget. And just like it would have been any other time, it's not like it was somehow diminished in a weird way. It was almost even made more special because it was during the pandemic.
Yeah, you'll know that your wedding stands out for all of the people that attended it because it was different. It was different. You despite all of the odds, like still pulled it off.
Absolutely.
Amazing. What, Dave and Alicia, what is the big standout moment from your wedding that you remember the most when you think back?
Oh man. I guess I'll say 2. There's 2. Can I say 2? Can I say 2? Yeah, I'm breaking the rules. Like when we got to say our vows, it was amazing, and for sure, that was one of my favorite moments. Trying to hold my shit together was like tough, but also we got to do this wedding dance in front of people that we weren't sure we were going to be able to do. We ended up talking about flexibility. We ended up practicing it 2 or 3 days before, making this thing up, practicing it here in our living room, practicing it in the hotel room, practicing it right before you went to get ready that next morning. And the best version we did of it was the one we did in front of everyone. So that was a pretty special moment of the day.
Yeah.
Amazing. Andrea?
I would say looking out at everyone when we were signing the papers, and like seeing everybody in their masks, but just seeing everyone there, and you could tell the smiles through their eyes. And I think that was just like such a meaningful moment, that like there were so many people that I loved there. And that was definitely a standout moment for me, was just feeling the love from all those people that I loved.
Liz and Ben?
One of my favorite moments from the day was we're reading our vows, and Liz has to grab a tissue to like dry her eye, and she sticks her hand in her pocket in her wedding dress, and everybody erupted in laughter. They were like, her wedding dress has pockets? That's crazy. And that was probably, and Krista got a photo of it, and it's one of my favorite things. But I'd say another one is like after everything, we're sitting in the side room. It's like between the photos and the family photos and then the reception. And Elise from Legends just like walks into the side room, and it's just me and Liz just hanging out. We just wanted 15 minutes together just to enjoy just like what just happened. And she just brings an entire tray of champagne, just an entire tray. And she's like, I think you guys need this, and just puts it down next to us. And those two moments I think stood out for me.
And then right after that, Mike came in with food, and
Yeah.
I remember that moment.
Yeah.
And everybody told us before the wedding, they were like, oh, you're not going to eat on your wedding day. And I'm like, you even know me? Like, I need to eat all the time. So brought in the food. Ben and I hung out for a bit. We drank some champagne, and then we got all like ready to go do our photos with Krista out on the golf course. And that was fun.
Awesome. Actually, you guys all did first looks.
Yeah.
I was just about to bring up my first look as like one of my favorite moments. Actually, I was thinking about that.
Yeah, it was.
It was because my mom actually decided to
Yeah.
play a little bit of a prank on Dave and come out. So we were outside of the pillar and post, and he thought it was me walking up behind him, but really it was my mom with the bouquet. And so there's hilarious. I love those pictures. They're
I think I've
awesome.
seen those pictures. They're good.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah, and she wanted to do that, and I just love that she came forward wanting to do that,
No,
and
it was so fun.
it
It
was
was
so
hilarious.
fun. And then I don't know, and then the first look for us too was just super special. So
I would recommend a first look to anybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely anybody. Our parents had never been to a wedding where that had happened before. And when we were going through the photos with them, they were like, can you explain to us a first look? So we like showed them all the photos, and we explained why it's a good idea, especially when you're going to a location where your guests like might have to leave in between the ceremony and the reception if there's no like buffer. So first look, awesome. It was super fun. It was great. It was
just for us.
Yeah,
too,
exactly.
Right? Like we got to spend an hour and a half or an hour and a half just together, just hanging out.
Yeah.
And
also, so there was no meltdown at the altar when he gave me it for the first time. So
yeah, and it was you know, that was one of the things that was important to us, is that we got to spend time with each other on our day. Like we had a sweetheart table, we did the first look, we hung out with a tray of champagne, like just spending time together. That's what it's all about.
I think COVID allowed you to do that. And I think that's one of the pros, like that you did get to have that intimate time together. And I think even though I didn't have 240 people at my wedding, I now get to celebrate with every one of those people individually the next time I see them, which is also pretty cool, because I wouldn't have spent nearly as much time with them as I would on my next one-on-one setting that I'll have with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and that's why I do recommend the first look with couples. And I think during COVID, especially too, like you kind of commented, because everything's already so heightened and kind of a little bit stressy of the day, you know, like weddings are stressful enough as it is, but then you add the COVID component on top of it, it kind of gives it a whole new level. So bravo to all of you for making through like champions. But I think having that time to just kind of decompress with your partner before the ceremony, before all the stuff happens, you know, is really nice and really important for your connection, and, you know, just to calm your nerves too before the day takes off. And then also being able to just go right into partying with your guests right after, right? Not having to leave and go off for 2 hours to take photos. You know, it just really gives a better flow for the day, and it gives us more time too, that's more relaxed with the photos, and, you know, we're not rushing to get you back. And It's good. Awesome. Okay. Any last words? Any final thoughts? You guys are amazing, by the way. You guys have the most brilliant, beautiful answers. I couldn't love you any more than I do. Thank you again so much for doing this. I think that's really going to be helpful for couples who are getting married in 2021, even maybe 2022. We don't know, how long this is going to go. Hopefully, fingers crossed, 2022 is safe. But as I think all of you can agree, and everyone watching can agree, that the pandemic has taught us is that, like, you just got to be prepared for anything at this point. Like, you just don't know where life is going to go.
I agree. And just thank you to you, Krista, for this. I think that had I had this to watch before we got married, it would have probably been really helpful. So thank you for all your work and all your effort that you helped us and supported us through everything that we had to deal with. And you were definitely able to go on the fly and work around all of the craziness that needed to happen. So thank you.
And thank you, Krista. You were amazing.
Thanks, Krista.
Ah,
Yes, dude.
love. I don't know what I'm going to do after this call. I'm like so jacked up right now. So awesome. Thank you again. Okay, we'll end things here, and love you, love. Just love.
Thanks.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Hey, nice to meet you all.
Happy
Yes,
birthday.
nice meeting you all.
Thank you.